The silver Tahoe sat in my driveway at 2:11 p.m. on a Tuesday. I sat in my truck at the curb, watching the engine run while February turned the sky into concrete. I am a man who counts. I count steps, seconds, and the cash withdrawals from our joint account that started 8 months ago, $200 at a time, every Tuesday and Thursday. I had filed those numbers away, waiting for the right moment. Now, seeing my co-worker's truck at my home, I was ready. I went in through the back. I oiled the lock 6 months ago, so the key was silent. Pushing the door open 2 inches, I heard the undeniable sounds coming from upstairs. I stood in the kitchen for 11 seconds, staring at my 4-year-old daughter Cora's drawing on the fridge, 4 stick figures, and a dog we didn't own. Then, I quietly backed out, returned to my truck, and did the math. 41 Tuesdays, 41 Thursdays, 11 months. Donovan Rafferty sat 3 feet from me every broadcast day, asking about my wife Sloane at the end of every show. The kind of question a man asks when he already knows the answer and wants to watch you not know it. I had driven for months with her chemical-sweet perfume lingering on my passenger headrest, telling myself it meant nothing. I had been keeping the wrong kind of score. The 6 o'clock show ran clean. I was in the booth early, my copy sorted, and water glass full. Rafferty walked in 2 minutes before airtime, slightly disheveled and smelling of Sloane's perfume. A fingerprint on a man. "Ready?" he asked. "Always," I replied. We did 90 minutes of sports radio. He borrowed his rhythm from me, his authority from proximity to my credibility, and his career from the fact that I made him sound better than he was. I had always known that. I just hadn't known the full price. By 8:47 p.m., I was at Pastor Quint Aldridge's office. He read my face and let me in without a word. I laid down the bank statements, phone records, and joint account withdrawals. Quint looked at the numbers and admitted that Sloane had claimed a $200 donation for a church lunch in February that never materialized. He wrote 2 words on a notepad and slid it to me. "Fitz Calhoun." He told me Fitz was on Meridian and would see me tomorrow. When I got home at 10, Sloane was in the kitchen with a wine glass, performing the act of a woman who had spent the afternoon doing nothing. She had showered twice, her hair was damp, and the chemical perfume was gone, replaced by a neutral floral scent. I kissed her soap-scented cheek, checked on our 3 children, Lena, Mac, and Cora, and went to the guest room to begin building my legal folder. 3 days later, I deliberately left a bank statement on the counter. When she confronted me, accusing me of insulting her by checking up on her spending, I asked directly about the missing Easter lunch funds. She brushed it off and stormed upstairs. My folder now had 47 pages. I needed 48. The next morning, I met Fitz Calhoun in his office. He was a compact man with a cold, still demeanor. He reviewed my folder for 4 minutes. He warned me that Sloane would try to claim my broadcasting income and syndication royalties as marital assets and push for immediate child support. He instructed me not to move out, not to alter the accounts, and not to say a word to her. In response, I slid my late father's 40-acre property deed and 6 years of accumulated back royalties across the desk. I told him I wanted everything placed into a protected children's trust, administered by Pastor Quint, before she could file. He promised it would be done in 6 days. "Whatever you're feeling right now," he told me, "put it somewhere cold." Sunday morning, I visited Dex Puitt, a retired 71-year-old postal worker who lived on my street. Without a word, he handed me a spiral notebook. It contained every arrival and departure date of Rafferty's Tahoe going back to January 14th, alongside plate numbers for 2 other unrecognized vehicles from the early months. Dex had logged it all, waiting until I was ready to ask for it. 2 days later, I cornered our technical producer, Hollis, in the station parking garage. Terrified, Hollis pulled out a separate device and handed over screenshots and saved voicemails of Rafferty, sobbing as his coffee spilled across the concrete floor. I transferred the files and demanded his signature on a witness statement, leaving him in the dark garage. At Fitz's office, his paralegal Aura handed me a stack of paperwork and quietly mentioned an app called Single Tune, not for dating, but for a values assessment that helped align what people believe and what they won't compromise on. Shortly after, Sloane's attorney filed an emergency motion for temporary support, locking onto my broadcasting income. For 3 weeks, I wrote checks for $2,200 every Friday, watching my savings drain while keeping my hands steady. I knew the children's trust was legally airtight. I moved into a bare apartment at the Terrace Arms, taping Cora's stick figure drawing above the sink. The following Thursday, while Cora ate cereal, she looked at me and asked, "Daddy, is our house broken?" I held her close, smelling her strawberry shampoo, and pressed my face into her hair. That night, I called Fitz with 2 words. No settlement. We go in. The DNA test results arrived on a Thursday. I read the document 3 times in my truck before emailing it to Fitz with instructions to seal it for the hearing. Sloane tried to corner me in the station's green room the following week, accusing Hollis of being unstable and throwing a coffee cup at the wall when I refused to engage. I picked up the cup, noted my segment timing, and walked to the booth. 30 minutes later, Rafferty stepped in and closed the door, something he had never done. He tried to intimidate me, but I laid out the reality. 41 documented Tuesdays, a neighbor's logbook, his voicemails, and a clear bank trail. The room went silent. We put on our headsets and delivered 93 minutes of flawless sports radio. At the preliminary hearing in Hargrove County, Sloane's attorney argued that the Children's Trust was established too close to the filing date to conceal assets. Judge Marin Okafor studied the documents carefully and overruled the objection, recognizing the trust as legally sound and administered by a reputable institution. Sloane's face tightened in shock as her lawyer's primary argument crumbled. Life continued in micro-moments. In the school pickup lane, I struck up a brief conversation with Nadia Ellsworth, a local electrician and fellow parent who had navigated her own brutal custody split. She spoke about wiring a panel in the dark, how you learn to work by feel and trust the connections you built before the lights went out. Later that week, Sloane spotted me speaking to Nadia for 4 minutes and launched into a public, tearful rant in the middle of the pickup line, accusing me of parading a girlfriend. I calmly removed her hand from my arm finger by finger, loaded my children into the truck, and drove away, leaving her standing with a teacher trying to de-escalate her. That night at 9 p.m., Fitz called with the formal DNA results. There was a pause before he spoke. One of the 3 children was not a genetic match. I sat down on the cold kitchen floor, counting the ceiling tiles in the dark, before asking him which one. It was Cora. The 4 seconds that followed were the longest of my life. I felt every single one of them. Then, I told him firmly, "She's still mine, Fitz. Use it in court for the custody math. That's all." I was protecting 3 kids. That was the whole job. The night before the final hearing, I sat in my apartment with full access to Rafferty's emails, voicemails, and booth recordings, provided by Hollis. I drafted a script that would obliterate his career and broadcast his betrayal to the world within hours. I read it twice, then hit delete. Exposing him wasn't justice. It was just noise. I labeled the evidence. Court use only. I had built a weapon designed to destroy a man, but choosing not to fire it was my own conscious choice. Nadia texted me late that night, sensing I would be awake. We ended up talking for an hour. She shared how she had grounded herself before her own hearing by inventorying every room in her house from memory, deciding what was truly hers to keep. She admitted that 6 months after her divorce, she had tried the single-tune values assessment, which led her to focus on core beliefs rather than superficial traits. Laying in the dark after hanging up, I looked at the drawing above my sink and felt a quiet shift inside me. At 7:30 a.m. the next morning, Pastor Quint sat in Fitz's office wearing his dark grey cardigan, holding a notarized statement detailing the cash withdrawal patterns, the phantom church donation, and his clean administration of the Children's Trust. Beside it lay a letter from Sloane's therapist confirming session dates that aligned perfectly with her meetings with Rafferty. When we entered the courtroom, the atmosphere was thick. Sloane and Rafferty sat near her attorney, but as Fitz systematically laid out the timeline, the bank records, Dex's precise logbook, and the financial structure of the protected trust, the air left the room. Sloane's attorney had no ground left to stand on. When the judge reviewed the custody arrangements, and the integrity of the children's trust, it became clear that my preparation had built an unbreakable fortress around my children's future. We walked out of the courthouse into the sharp winter air. There were no dramatic outbursts, no grand speeches, just the quiet weight of resolution. I drove back to my apartment, walked into the kitchen, and looked at the drawing taped above the sink, 4 stick figures and a dog we didn't own. I took a deep breath, picked up my phone, and began typing out my answers to the values assessment, ready to count what truly mattered.